was I was racing against James Kershey at Nelson Ledges, and we was in the first two spots. In turn one, I went off and hit the wall.
Okay.
And that screwed up pretty good. Busted all my ribs up. But he come over and apologized and said it wasn't his fault. It ended up a tie rod end broke in two. The sleeve, tie rod sleeve. We think that's what happened.
What year was this?
Oh.
73? The logs that I seen, the earliest one was 73.
Oh, well, I was running a 72 Mustang.
Okay.
I had bought at the auction, and we made a race car out of it.
Not this one. Or this one.
Heck, I'd have to do some thinking again.
Okay.
But, or was it it was a 71 maybe. I have to get back and look at my pictures and stuff, because with this chemo medicine, it's messing my mind a little bit. But anyway, Kershey said, I got a car if you want to look at it. You know, he felt bad because I had the accident.
Right.
So I went to Cleveland and looked at it. It was the 70 Mustang. And
it was black then?
It was black. I think he had the number 33 on it.
32.
That's what Kershey run that number all the time.
The pictures I got said 32 on it.
Okay. Well, I got the logbook, I think, from him that's got his picture in it.
Yeah, I think it says 32 on there too.
And if not, I've got the picture that was in the logbook.
Okay.
And I got some albums. And he said he couldn't keep an engine together, you know, being a Ford. And he was running a Camaro, and then Ed Hinchcliffe was in on the deal to talk to me, because Ed built the Cherokee Nation Monza for James Kershey to run the Trans Am series. Okay, Ed's the one that built that.
And what series was this that you were running in?
I was running in SCCA Regionals.
Okay.
Regionals, Nationals.
Okay.
And I was going to beat Kershey, and that's why all these big guys started coming around and talking to me, you know, because I blew Kershey off and went off the track.
Okay.
And they thought that they'd done something, and basically I just was so goddamn fast. Too much pressure on that, you know, standard type parts. And so anyway, I went to Cleveland. I looked at the car, and my dad gave me the money to buy it. And
how much was that?
I don't remember what I paid for it. I know I had to do some serious digging. And we come home, and I have always run Ford, so I put one of my motors in it, you know. And I had went to Brookside Lincoln Mercury in Fort Wayne and was buying engine parts to build a Ford GT40 engine. And the man behind the parts counter, his name was Ben Ultra. He's a super guy. I'd had a Cougar. I'd go over there and get parts, and you need a little piece of chrome for a fender extension on the rear. He'd write the part number down, never open a book.
Right.
And he said, well, I can still get you a boss. And I said, they said they ain't available. He said, yeah, they are. They don't call them a boss. He said, they're a 302 special. So he showed me and stuff, and I said, I want one. So he actually ordered me one in, and I didn't have the money for it. He could have sold it 3 or 4 times. But he was a man of his word, and so was I. And so finally I got the boss, and I had it. I have some of the original Ford muscle car books that told you how to, you know, the different ways you could build the motor.
Right.
And so I put that together, and it was in 77 when I had run the car a few years, and in 77 I went to Nelson Ledges to run a Trans Am. I think that was my first Trans Am race, my first pro race. And because I was standing beside of Hurley Hayward at the drivers' meeting, and this was, you know, was kind of cool. And he says, you knew? And I said, yeah. He said, well, don't worry about it. He said, they ain't no better than you are. And I went out, and of course we was having a lot of different difficulties with the motors and stuff, but I was building all my own with the help of a couple machine shops around here.
Right.
And I don't remember what the heck happened, but I went out of the race, and I come back in, and when Ed Hinchcliffe was running in the race, and he ran like it was a 71 through 3 series Mustang. First time I met him was in Indianapolis, and I pulled up, and he said, oh, no, park here. And I said, why? You don't want to know anybody to know you got a chopped top and this and that on the car? And I didn't park by him, and we become, you know, fairly decent to one another. And he was in a race, and I was about to blow his ass off. I never qualified good. I couldn't get my act together, and it wasn't racing, you know, right. It wasn't the race. So I was coming up through, I think I went from like 37th to 17th, and something happened when I went out, and I was ready to blow Ed Hinchcliffe off about the time I went out of the race. And I ended up getting to the pits, and I think what it was is, if I'm remembering correctly, the week before that race I went to, we built a hell of a 302. I bought one from up around Perrysburg or Toledo, and we put it together. The guy had built it for a Bronco or something, for an off-roader. And we put it together, and we had run it a couple times. And the week before I was at, can't think of the name of the track, it was Ohio.
Mid-Ohio?
Mid-Ohio. I was at Mid-Ohio. And I went up there, and I blew the motor. But in the process, we beat a sedan track record, B production track record, and A production track record. But it was unofficial.
Right.
And I come up onto the front straight, and he went blah, 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 and shut off, and I coasted up on the outside of the pit wall, and smoke was rolling. And we come in and had a big hole in the pan. So ended up, that was the engine I was supposed to run in a Trans Am. So what I did is I put a 289 in instead of a Boss when I went to run the Trans Am, and we used the same distributor. And that's what happened. I come around, the car shut off. And I come in, and we pulled it out, and we had another distributor in the truck. We took the steel roll pin out of the cam gear and put it in, right in the pits, switched to that, put it back in, and I went out, and I was actually on the track coming around and got the green flag for the end, the checkered flag for the end of the race. And then was back in the pits, and here come Ed Hinchcliffe, and he had Warren Tope's dad with him.
Yeah.
And they come up and shook my head and stuff, and Ed asked me what happened and so forth, and I told them, and they said they never heard of anybody that had a distributor spin out and then fixed it in the pits and went back to the race. And this thing I started like 37th, I was in 17th when this happened. I don't remember where I ended up finishing. Of course, we wasn't out just a lap or two.
Right.
But he said that Warren Tope's dad wanted to shake my hand, and he said that it's the first time that they'd seen Warren Tope's sister car for a long time. And he knew who it was because Ed, like I said, worked with Kershey and so forth.
So did Ed get it from the Tope camp, or how did from
Ed,
Tope?
Ed,
how did it go? Do you know?
Ed was involved with Warren Tope.
Okay.
Basically, Ford was backing drivers and stuff then. And Ed was particularly involved in all that. Like he had stainless steel headers and all that stuff that he had from working with Tope and all them. And I think Ed was a personal friend.
Right. So that's how he got it?
I think he probably talked to Kershey, you know, when Kershey was looking at the car when he bought it from Savage.
Right.
And they said it was Warren Tope's sister car. And like I said, Ed, I don't remember if Ed's the one that suggested that I look, or he told me some history about the car, you know, before I bought it from Kershey. And actually both of them was fairly close friends of mine, you know, because we've been both running the SACA circuit for a number of years. And then Ed, the engine I've got now that's in the car that's broke, Ed actually, over the telephone, gave me the plans to build this engine because I told him I was going to take a 206 cylinder, thinking about taking a 206 cylinder and building it. And Ed said, no, why don't you build a 351? He said, I've got a design for one. And actually the design, he said that Roush was building that engine also. And Ed built one. And I think the reason he did this is we was back at Nelson Ledges. And
was this a Cleveland or a Windsor?
Well, the 302 was a Cleveland.
Yeah.
And the 289s I running was Windsor, basically designed.
Right.
And I was running both. And he gave me the plans to build, and I call it a 355 Windsor Boss.
So it's a cleaver. That's what they call them.
Well,
it's part Cleveland and part Windsor.
And 427 Chevy rods.
Frankenstein.
Basically, Ed Hinchcliffe built one. And he gave me the plan. We was at Nelson, and Ed had this new engine, and I blowed his ass off down the front straight. And I told Ed I was thinking about building a 206 cylinder and maybe going turbo. And he said, hey, I got an engine that maybe you want to build instead. And so on the telephone, we spent, I don't know, a couple of weeks on the telephone at nights. And he gave me the blueprints for this Windsor Boss.
Right.
And the thing is he had Corolla rods or something, adjustable Corolla rods and stuff, you know. He had money where I didn't. And ended up, I took 427 Chevy rods and had them modified.
All right.
And we used 427 Chevy push rods and cut like a 1/4 inch out of them, put them back together. And those was kind of the two Chevy elements in the engine. But it was a Windsor block with a Cleveland crank and Chevy rods. And I ended up, it's got 302 Boss heads.
Right.
And I built the intake. Actually, I took an intake and built spacer plates on it so that it would fit because it was too small. When you put it on, it would drop down inside. And I built spacer plates for it and put on it. The 355 cubic inch, 570 horse. I got that wrote down in my book. It's like I said, it's been a long time now. Anyway, I had that. I run Daytona. I went to Daytona with it the last time it was run, and it was a long race, and basically my brother was co-driving, and I went out and run.
This is the last time this car run?
Right.
Okay.
I went out and run.
That was what year?
I would have to look that up. I don't remember.
82, 83, something like that?
It was prior to 89 because 89 I taught school.
Well, I've been coming over here since the early 80s, and that car's never moved since.
It's been a long time. I would have to look up the actual date on it, but actually Roush had a car at Daytona at that race also. And some of them guys at Roush, they kind of looked at us and laughed at us, you know, which is real, you know, it really pisses you off now.
Yeah.
But basically, I had a guy that run off-road and had a different crew, you know, for that race. But anyway, was down there, and I was on the back side of the track. Basically, when you run Daytona, they run the oval plus they cut off and do an inner course. Well, I was in that inside, and we had switched the trans. The guy told me, well, I used to have a partner that run with us from Pittsburgh. His name was Fred Whirl, and he said, oh, you got to get a different gearing, you know, because we was running basically the rear end I was running was a 444, and he said, oh, you're way too low. So we switched the rear end and we switched the transmission. I had another top loader. Well, I got it down in one of these tight turns on the inside in this practice, and I come in and I went to downshift. It was like hitting concrete. It wouldn't go in gear.
All right.
And I went off the track and I was heading right for a wall. And I got the car turned sideways and bounced off of it. And it broke the left rear quarter. I built my own fiberglass.
Right.
And it just broke from the rear wheel to the bumper. There's a piece that broke off, but there was the original metal fender quarters underneath of it.
Okay.
When I put them on, we took the fender flares off, and then I built a quarter panel that goes to the top edge of the quarter,
right.
And it was the whole quarter with the flare on it. So basically, we just attached that, and it broke a piece off of it. And I come in and we went back, looked for the piece, but being at Daytona, people jump in the wall grabbing anything they can get. You know,
right.
Some fan got that piece and took off with it. So we put the car up in the air, or no, my brother had to go out and take a run. So he went out and run around, and I told him the trans wasn't right, the rear end wasn't right, just go out and make some laps. Don't try and do anything because the car ain't ready.
Right.
And when he come in, was standing there, and he'd come down into the pits, and he got about, there's a place, a break in the wall where we went back, and he got about there, and the car he shut the car off. I thought he shut the car off. And when he come in there, he said, talked to him later, he said, no, he slowed down and it shut off. We pushed it back, jacked it up. I have a removable front end on it. We took the front end off. We pulled the rear end, pulled the trans. I had the other trans with us. We had different rear ends with us. So we was going to get the car ready. And I had a nephew with me. And he said, should I pull the spark plugs? And I was, you know, it won't hurt. We can pull and look, see what they're doing. He pulled the spark plug out, and the end was sheared off of it.
Oh.
And so we went to turn the engine over by hand, and it wouldn't turn over. So we pulled the head off, and there was a valve turned sideways, stuck in the top of the piston. And I have a 3-pound hammer, and I couldn't hit that valve and knock that out of that piston with a 3-pound hammer. And basically, the intake valve and the exhaust valve was missing. The exhaust valve was the one turned sideways and sticking in the piston. Well, with one head off the engine, we went to turn it over, and it still wouldn't turn over. So what I determined there was the one valve broke, got underneath the other valve, broke it. It turned sideways, jammed in the piston. The other valve went across the intake and is laying on top. Now, I never have pulled that other head to prove it, but the other valve is laying on top of a piston on the other side. I had ported this intake out, that it's big enough that the valve could get across. And basically, when I went, we had this motor. I had a in fact, I still have the 302 Boss that I bought originally from Brookside Lincoln Mercury. In fact, the heads on the race engine come off of that end. But I had a machine shop that was working with me that rebuilt that engine. I took it down, and they always did all my machine shop work. And I rebuilt it, And I had a 289 and took down and rebuilt it. And so the boss was standing on an engine stand, right? Well, the 289 they redid for me. Come down, I went to put the heads on, the heads wouldn't fit. They put the rods on the pistons backwards. And I called the machine shop and they said, oh, that don't matter. We do that on the Chevys all the time. Just take them out, turn them around, and put them back in. Well, I did that like a dumbass. And there is a thing called, my brother took a hydraulics course, there's a thing called kinematic, it's a word about 10 miles long, kinematic realization or something like that.
$50 word.
Yeah. That rod was made to run one direction. You cannot turn it around.
Right.
And so I turn them around, and I had trouble with that engine all the time. Basically, we put 12 oil pumps in that engine.
Wow.
And I was at Mid-Ohio with not my regular crew, with just somebody else. A couple guys went with me one time, had that engine in there. And what would happen is I keep losing oil pressure. And I come in and dropped the pan, changed the oil pump, and went back out in between practices. And it never worked, and I had oil pumps I built, I'm trying to think of the name. I got parts out of California. Some springs, relief springs, and different things like that from them. And Pro Stock Engineering, I think was the name of it, because I bought push rods from them also. That engine that I blew at Mid-Ohio had Pro Stock Engineering push rods in it, and it turned them, their Air Moly aircraft material, turned them into S's. Because when I blew that engine, what happened when I blew that engine at Mid-Ohio, that one that we'd bought from Perrysburg, I didn't have the money, so I spot checked it. Pulled it over, pulled some of the main bearings, some of the rods, and everything I checked was all right. There's 8 spark plugs, you don't check one spark plug. There's, it was a hard lesson to learn,
right,
why I blew that engine. But what happened is the rod went. Well, when the rod went, it hit the valves, backlashed, and sheared the pin off the front of the cam. And the cam freeloaded in that engine. That's what happened. If cam freeloaded, when the cam freeloaded, I had valves and stuff doing everything they weren't supposed to. And it actually split the block also on that when I blew that. I mean, you can't blow them any harder than that. I'm surprised it didn't shrapnel. But so anyway, I had been running this the 289, which was a 255, or no. The 289s, we had about a 305 cubic inch.
So that's the last time.
That's the last time I run it. And actually, I had put a dry sump system on it because we had oiling problems.
Okay.
And the guy that built my dry sump system run a sprint car. His name was Jim Yan from Van Wert.
Yep, know him.
And
knew him.
He built the dry sump system I had, or the tank built local. We made our own oil tank, and he built an Aviade dry sump pump and put on it. And I built a custom bracket, aluminum bracket, to bolt it on the front of the motor that just fit. Nobody made anything,
right,
so I had to make my own. And after I had run the car the last time, and Jim Yan was still alive at that time, he was running the sprint car. In fact, I talked to him about driving the sprint car, but he didn't want to hurt the feelings of his driver, kind of deal. In fact, I was involved with a couple different people that talked about driving, but never came about,
Well, the joys of youth.
Yeah. Anyway, it was after I had run that last, and it was sitting here. It was a couple years after that. He come over and he run and blew a motor, and he wanted to borrow my oil pump. And because he blowed the motor, he needed to disassemble his and go through it and stuff. And he had a race, so he wanted to know if he could borrow mine. I said, yeah. So I took it off and let him borrow it. Well, he had it for a while. I wasn't doing anything with it. And then he up and died. He died, and I never got my oil pump back.
Right.
So
history of the car. You told me you thought it might be a Carcraft car.
There was, I think it was Carcraft or can't remember. I'm thinking that was the name of the. They built the two cars that was supposed to be Warren Topes and his sister car.
Right.
They built two cars.
Do you have any idea the time frame?
Well, I don't know. You gave me that. I seen them pictures you had. They said it said something about Warren Topes Boss 69. I don't quite understand that because mine is a 70, and the biggest reason you can tell is the taillights.
Right. Well, headlights too. He had both. I found both.
Well,
69, 70s.
I seen some of that, and I looked at one, and it was a rear picture. It was a 69 taillight.
Yeah.
But I looked at another picture on there. It was a 70 front fender extension.
Yeah.
So I don't know there, but this, I think it was Carcraft. They said it built.
Now, would that be inconceivable of Tope to buy 70 taillights, the taillight panel, the front? You could do it.
You mean change a 69 to a 70? No, that's very easy.
I've messed around with that, so I know what goes into that.
Well, the only difference on where the taillight is basically this, you put a different taillight panel, like you say, because the 69.
It's curved.
Well, the biggest thing is it had 3 slots.
And it's got that curve in it.
On each side.
Yeah, it's got a curve in it.
Where the 70.
It's flat. And it's a big open box.
It has one opening. So.
The slots are in that little housing that go outside the taillight on a 70.
Right.
Yeah.
It's basically
Mach 1's chrome and the Boss is usually black, right?
I can't even answer you on
that. The one on the blue one was. And the orange one.
And then the front, the 69 had 2 headlights.
Mm-hmm.
The 70 had 1.
Mm-hmm. So you'd have to change the grill, and I mean you could use those front fenders, but you'd have to cut that.
The fenders was the same. 69, 70 was the same on the fenders.
Marker light on the side. But I mean, we're splitting hairs there. It could be done pretty easy.
Oh yeah. But you know what I don't doubt Ed Hinchcliffe and Warren Tope's dad.
Warren Tope, the 69 that he had is restored.
Is it?
Yeah. The 70, we don't know.
I've never, like I said, if I could get a hold of Ed Hinchcliffe. Ed Hinchcliffe was an engineer for Ford.
All right.
And actually, when
I think this guy that we're talking to knows him.
Okay. I wished I could get a hold of Ed because he was really a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
And he was involved. He was part of this stuff back when Tope was in there.
Right.
And he has answers. You know, and you know when they
now, so when you say a sister car, it wasn't his car that he drove, but it was part of his team, or as a backup car, or.
Well, apparently Carcraft built these 2 cars.
Right.
Now, I don't know how exactly they run the team, but they always called it his sister car.
Right.
So Warren Tope run this one, and I don't know who all run the sister car.
I know Gene Harrington did a couple. Do you know who that is?
No, I don't. I'm not familiar with him.
He only looked like he only run like 4, maybe 6 races.
All I know about that is when I did finally get a hold of, I got Kershey from his lawyer business after we'd talked the last time.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, I said, you know, do you have a logbook that you got with this or any other thing? And he said, no, I don't have anything. Well, knowing Kershey, he'd probably throw shit away anyway.
Right.
He was that type
right.
guy, you know, and he's doing newer and different things with his Monza and his Camaro. But I asked him, he said, no. He said,
well, that stuff didn't mean anything back then.
No. And so I don't know if he never got the previous logbook with the car.
Right.
Or if he threw it away or what he did.
Okay.
Because back then when we was running, you couldn't use it. You had to update the logbook.
Is there a couple things we need to look for? I'm going to try and get some pictures before I leave. Was there a brass stamped
No.
on the roll bar?
It's stamped in the roll bar.
It's stamped in the roll bar?
Stamped in the roll bar.
Okay.
There's no brass.
Okay. How about the rear end? It's supposed to be, when you got it, it's supposed to be, if it's a Carcraft car, it's supposed to be a 5-link.
What's a 5-link?
Um,
Well, I'll tell you what I know. It's a floater rear end.
okay.
In other words, on the rear end,
I think
you can take.
two that way, and one.
The thing is you take an Allen wrench, and there's an aluminum hub.
Right.
Okay, it's got an Allen wrench takes 3 bolts loose. You turn that around and screw it in the end of your axle and pull your axle out.
Yeah.
You don't take anything on the rear end apart.
So this is the configuration.
It's a float.
When you got it.
It's the way I got
Okay.
it. It was a floater rear end. I never changed it. The rear end appears to be the same as other rear ends, except it's got this. You basically can pull the axles out without even taking the wheels off the car, because we've already done it where we had to push the car. We'd spin these around, pull
Right.
the axles. We could push the car. One guy can lean on the car, and push the car.
So you bashed the front end in, didn't you? Or not on this car?
No.
What's the deal with the bars instead of the?
Well, after I crashed that 72.
I seen a picture of the front end of a 70 that I got from one of your books, that the whole front end's bashed in, and I thought you told me at one time.
I didn't wreck the 70.
Okay.
I didn't wreck 70. The only crash I really had was the 72.
Okay. So I guess that's all I need about.
Basically, I changed. In fact, I actually built a car when Fred Whirl was partners with us. He had a 68 Mustang.
Right.
And it was actually one of the original, it was a NASCAR, and they had modified it for Trans Am.
Right.
And we had that, but and basically when we split our partnership, we bought the car from him. And actually my brother sold that car.
Okay. So,
but at that time, I was repairing and building cars for some other guys.
right.
I built one car that went to Texas.
You guys, I remember right when I started coming over, you guys had quite the operation going on here.
Well, and there was a guy who had a IMSA RS Pinto from Pennsylvania, which was friends of Fred Whirl, and they wrecked that, and basically I rebuilt that car. So I built a couple cars back then. We was heading in the right direction. I don't know whatever happened where I should have stayed,
Is there anything else about that 70 you can tell me that'd be helpful? History or anything?
Well, basically, see, that's the time when I modified the car.
Right.
Well, when I first got it, we made, I don't remember if that's about time. Basically, what I did is because of the accident I had with the 70, I decided that like in the 72, I don't have a roll bar.
Right.
I built a cage in the car. I extended it into the trunk and extended it through the firewall, and I made the whole car a cage.
That's on the 70?
And the 70 is done that way too.
Okay.
And what I did on the 70 is I come across basically the shock towers.
Right.
It's got the original shock towers, but I put a bar across.
And it doesn't have none of the sheet metal around.
It does not have the front and the rear apron.
Right.
I took them off, and I went past the shock tower and went at an angle down to the front of the frame.
Okay.
And then anything in front of that is bar, but it's exhaust tubing.
Yeah.
And basically the way I designed this is if you hit something, that your crossbar in the front that holds your radiator and so forth,
it'll collapse.
This could collapse and
Yep.
go away.
Yep.
And with the angle of the bar coming up that goes to shock towers would protect actually the engine itself.
Right.
But I was concerned about the drivers.
Right.
Whoever's driving that car has to be safe when it's
Absolutely.
done. And so basically I built that, plus that eliminated, a lot of them had that bar that went across from shock tower to shock tower.
Yeah.
They made a heavy duty. Okay, you didn't really need that in this car because now this
Shock towers didn't flex.
these aprons
Right.
are part of the cage. I
Right.
basically strengthened the car all the way around. You didn't need that. And then what I did was make a fiberglass front end that Zeus foosed on.
Yeah.
And so when you worked on the car, you could set the front end, take the hood off with 4 pins, 5 pins. You had to have one in the center on the front or the hood would bow
Right.
from the speeds. But you take the hood off and you un-Zeus foos the nose and you set it on a tire and work on the engine.
Right.
You know, it made it very accessible, and it made it so easy to, we was changing oil pumps one time, and me and one other guy at the shop, one of the guys that used to be on my crew, from start to finish, pulled the car in, pulled the car out in about 90 minutes. We pulled an engine out, took the oil pan off, changed the oil pump, and put it back together in 90 minutes.